Today's interviewee for the Hoffman Reed Lessons in Leadership podcast and video series is Lynne Stewart from PAN Trustees. Lynne, thank you very much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Lynne, I guess if we could start with you talking us through your career history. I think a number of our listeners and viewers are interested in how people have got to where they are today. So if you could just talk us through your career and let us know a little bit about yourself and some of the sort of highs and lows you've had along the way.
Certainly. So certainly nobody starts out after education thinking, gosh, I want to be a pension consultant or a pension trustee. And I think that's very much the case in life, isn't it? You don't really know where you're going to end up and what career path you might follow. So I think it's important to keep an open mind and trust a little bit into fate and who you know. Networking is quite important. So my career started where I joined a small firm and worked my way up through the ranks and was chief executive and shareholder for about 10 years in a firm called EB Consultants Limited. And that was terribly enjoyable. We were nimble, flexible, able to be our own masters, and enjoyed that independence for, in total, about 25 years. But the owner and founder was 77 in the end, and it was really time to sell. So we decided to get ourselves ready for sale and sold to a company called Bluefin. So that was interesting for me, a transition from a firm of about 70 people to, I think, about 500, AXA owned, but 500 in the pensions arm. And then 4 years later, we were sold to Capita. So I'm quite used to being sold like a commodity along the way, but really enjoyed the challenges that each of those acquisitions brought, which I think is a lesson in itself. In my business, I work with firms that are acquired and sold, but to actually be on the receiving end of that, you know, you can actually find out that that's potentially a very positive step. And I think one of the key lessons I learned there is to adapt to the changes. Don't kick out. That doesn't mean to say you just have to accept everything that's pushed your way, but really keep an open mind. And then you can embrace all the new opportunities that are presented to you by the new owner. And I think if you prove your worth, you will stay and flourish with that new owner. So that's what I've done. I've just come full circle now to rejoin PAN Trustees as a small independent firm. So I very much enjoyed working for Capita, being one of 70,000 compared to 70 when I started. But I think after 6 years, I probably had enough of that experience and wanted to go back more where I could make a real difference in a smaller firm. So with PAN Trustees, that's given me that opportunity.
And in your role with PAN Trustees, you sit as a professional trustee on a number of pension fund boards. How have you found that transition from executive to non-executive life?
Well, that's an interesting question because a lot of the skills and disciplines that I've learned in a large PLC like Capita have actually been quite useful in transitioning to back to a smaller firm, because nowadays, and particularly in the business I'm in, governance and regulation and, I don't know, cybercrime, GDPR, conflicts of interest, all the things which you have enormous policies for in a large PLC are actually also very relevant in a small firm and when you're running your own business in particular. So I think I've been able to bring a lot of that discipline and understanding as to why we do things. It's given a level of importance to those boring regulatory things that we do have to do that perhaps I might otherwise have overlooked. And you know, you can sit back. I'm now in my role as a trustee. You know, I've got a number of sole trustee cases, and I chair a number of the boards. So it is like attending board meetings, executive board meetings, and taking decisions for those pension schemes.
What have been the sort of key lessons you've learned throughout your career then?
Key lessons. Well, I think probably in terms of getting a job done, you have to accept that really you shouldn't and can't do it on your own. So you have to accept that there are other people in the business that have a significant contribution to make, and therefore being able to manage people and manage teams to keep them motivated and contributing to a shared vision or a shared objective or a shared target, that is absolutely crucial. Even working in a relatively small firm, you know, one could argue that's even more the case when you have key personalities. Everybody's got their own personalities, and it's very important to collaborate. So I think there's a very human aspect to management and leadership. You know, there are lots of textbooks that give you all sorts of tools and tricks on how to get the best out of people. But I think in my experience, the best managers and leaders are people who are life-wise and empathetic with human beings. So it's about being able to put yourself into other people's shoes, understanding what they're feeling and what their objectives might be, and then you can dovetail those with your own objectives and tailor the package so that you can both produce what is required. So I think that's probably something that I realise is important, just dealing with people and dealing with them well.
It's really interesting the way that you mentioned dealing with people and dealing with people well there. How do you go about maintaining compassionate leadership and helping an employee when their performance is perhaps unsatisfactory or not meeting the levels that you would expect?
Well, I think this is a situation where you really have to be firm but fair, and mixing up the emotional connection that might go on if an employee is going through some perhaps personal difficulties at home or mental health issues or whatever it may be. You know, mixing that personal sympathy with the business objective is not good. I think you need to separate the two. So, and I think it's possible to do both, providing you draw a line. And therefore, I think on an individual level, I would be compassionate and listen. If the person wants to talk to me, I may not be somebody that they want to take into their confidence, but certainly give people the time to speak. But then also very clearly, it's almost like you're wearing a different hat in the same meeting. Turn the subject to the commercial aspects of the discussion, which may mean an exit package, a compromise agreement, might be redundancy, might be that they're on a performance improvement program. And when you're dealing with the commercial aspects of those, or the HR aspects, you just have to make sure you deliver the message clearly, checking along the way that they understand what you're talking about, but making sure that all those I's are dotted and T's are crossed, because from a commercial point of view, that can get you into a lot of trouble if you haven't dealt with those situations properly. So yes, be empathetic. Yes, be a human being. Nobody likes to see anyone suffer, but you can actually help them by doing a good job in clarifying what needs to be done to support the business. So what is expected of them in their role. And in the bottom, the bottom line is that If people can't do their job and can't be helped to do their job, then they shouldn't be there, not for the employer and not for the employee. So that may be an outcome, but we do everything that we can to do along the way to make sure that you get the right outcome.
So I guess the flip side of that is, how do you evaluate yourself as a leader?
Well, I think the simple answer to that is that I don't. Because if I'm left to my own devices, I would just think I'm absolutely marvelous at pretty much everything that I do. So I think, quite honestly, and my husband wouldn't share that view, I have to say, but I think it's very important, is what I'm saying, to get some, other party feedback to that, and not be afraid to hear what needs to be done. So everybody, at any level, should be seeking that feedback from other people in terms of their performance and approach. In terms of your effectiveness, of course, I mean, if you are given clear targets in your job, then it's relatively easy to measure your effectiveness against, let's say, a financial target. So if you've got to make £5 million this year in a particular sales effort, have you achieved it? Have you exceeded it? If you haven't done that, what are the reasons? So, things can come out in evaluation. I do some personal reflecting, particularly at the end of a day or after what might be a difficult meeting, or something happened that I wasn't expecting. It's very healthy to take some time to reflect afterwards, to say to yourself, could that have gone better? Is there something I should have said that I didn't say? How was that particular comment received? Could there have been a better outcome? Is there anything I missed off? Those sorts of things. I don't think you need to beat yourself up about it, because otherwise you break your own confidence level to go into the next meeting. But a period of self-reflection, I think, is absolutely crucial.
And is there a particular key indicator then that makes you aware as an individual that your leadership style or your leadership in general is becoming less effective?
I think it's almost the same way that you would pick up that a friend is behaving to you differently or being a bit off. We're all people, whether we are friends outside of the office or colleagues in business in the office. We're all human beings. So I think it's very important to keep that human aspect in sight. And when somebody is motivated, you can see in the way that they speak to you, their body language, whether they understand, whether they are in over their head. These sorts of things, I say, perhaps good managers know this, and if they can't see it, then I think that would prevent them being effective as a manager. So it's really just being in touch with the people that you work with at any level, above you and below you, peers as well.
So I think that's quite interesting. If we look at the current environment with COVID, we've got employees working from home, people working in isolation. You don't get that day-to-day interaction and body language and be able to pick up on the nuances, I guess, that you can in person, because it's much easier to hide that via video. So have you found any differences in terms of working remotely and leading versus when you're face-to-face and in person?
Yes, I have. You're quite right. I mean, one of the key differences is that I only need to get the top half of me dressed nowadays, which is quite a new development. And I think the same is true for the rest of the team. But in terms of picking up those nuances, as you say, speaking to people, does a lot of that. Yes, you won't see them at the end of the office slamming a pencil down or bashing a drawer or you know, leaving the room before a conversation is finished, sort of thing. You won't necessarily pick those up. But I think providing you stay in regular contact with some voice contact, and it doesn't have to be a video call, because funnily enough, the addition of a video, I think, sometimes increases the inhibition in people. So more frequently with my team, I've just been having some phone calls. You know, initially we were all Teams, we were all Zoom, and everybody was there all the time. But I think now, you know, they just ring me. We keep our mobiles on us all the time, and then we can have a nice relaxed chat. And I think they're, you know, you're not being watched. So I think that's probably a piece of advice that I would give. Don't assume that seeing the other person on screen effectively replaces seeing them in the office. I think actually sometimes it takes something away, and you'd be closer to a real relationship if you just heard their voice and you just both sat quietly, comfortably talking to each other.
And would you say that working predominantly remotely in the current environment has given you a new set of problems or challenges to overcome? And if so, how have you gone about overcoming those challenges?
I think it probably gave everybody the same challenges at the beginning, in the sense that we're all used to working in a certain way. So ignoring the team aspect of Pan Trustees, just looking at my own job and being a trustee on a board of other trustees, you know, I came from a world where you did that face to face. You know, you attend a board meeting, you go and sit around a big table, you know, there's some snacks in the corner and coffee on tap, and you know, you can have side meetings with somebody during a break and then back to the main meeting. All that sort of way of working has, you know, you suddenly think, well, I can't do that anymore. And yes, you've got Zoom and you've got Teams, but we all were faced with a shift in custom and practice in our behaviours before. But I don't see that it was a big problem. I mean, we pretty soon adjusted. I remember just at lockdown, I was going to do a tender for advisors. So that would be the old beauty parade where everybody comes in their best bib and tucker and puts up their PowerPoints and does online demos or whatever they do, and answers questions. And I couldn't contemplate how that would happen online. So we cancelled the meeting in March. But then lockdown went on, and you know, work is piling up, and you think, well, we've got a number of these to do. We just have to get on with it. So we did it on Zoom, and then we learned how screen sharing actually works quite well. Online demos can work better. So we managed, and so we've all adapted. And now I think I'm at a place where, you know, I don't think I'd mind terribly if it never went back to the way it was, because I've cut out all my traveling costs. I can join a meeting very quickly. I can come in and out of other meetings very quickly, you know, from one meeting to the next. So there are lots of pros and cons, lots of pros and cons. And I think we just need to learn how to manage in a new world, because I don't think we'll ever go back completely to the old world. I'd like to think we keep the best of both worlds. So not just go back to all face-to-face, not just continue everything on Zoom, but a bit of both. You know, pick your moments, pick your battles.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I've done a lot of work via Zoom and Teams and Skype and BlueJeans for a number of years now, because a lot of my clients are international, and obviously I can't jump on an aeroplane every time I need to have a conversation with somebody. However, what I found is important is that face-to-face contact is important, and you do need to meet people and have those conversations. But actually, a lot of the background work that we do in our day roles as leaders can actually be done via video and can be done quite effectively. And with screen sharing and presentations, you don't need to
Yes.
be in person to see those. It's
Yes.
more, for me, I feel it's more the relationship side, which is
Building new
lacking at the moment.
relationships is very hard, and I think the comments I made just now are probably rather selfishly considering my own position, because I'm looking at the way I worked before and the way I can work in the future. However, that does rather ignore a new wave of people coming into the industry, graduates starting work for the first time, people moving jobs, and joining a new firm. All that sort of settling in and getting your feet under the desk and getting to know and understand the culture is so much harder remotely. So it works if you're just transitioning from something that you know, but if you're joining something for the first time, then I think going forward it is going to be difficult. On the other hand, I am quite willing to accept that it's maybe us that have difficulties in forging new relationships on screen and online, and that a new generation which hasn't known any different, perhaps they can make it work. It's they won't have the preconceived ideas that we have. They will come into what we think is a strange world, but it might seem quite normal to them in a working environment.
Exactly. I think neuro-linguistic programming would suggest it's self-limiting beliefs when we tell ourselves we can't do something. But actually,
Yeah.
with a new generation of employees coming into the workplace, who know no different, maybe they can just simply get on with it, and it's us that have got to adapt rather than them.
Yeah, yeah.
What would you say has been the biggest leadership crisis you've faced, Lynne, and how did you go about overcoming it?
Crisis. Well, sort of leaving aside the consequences of the good old-fashioned mistakes, which you can always manage a crisis. What's the phrase? Don't make a drama out of a crisis. I mean, errors, unexpected problems that happen. That's just life, and doing your job well is all about managing the solution and finding your way through that well. But I would rather describe, for me personally, the biggest crisis in working for the large PLC, where I had a personal crisis, that it became apparent that when you get to an organization of a certain size, there are certain things in terms of strategy and approach and fixing mistakes that you are powerless to have any influence over. And I think that was a crisis for me. That hit me quite hard. Bearing in mind my background was from a small firm where I was chief exec, and basically we took the decisions, and you die by your own decisions as well, potentially, but nevertheless you are working and getting job satisfaction doing things that you think you're doing in the right way. If you work for a very large firm, you need to have a level of understanding and acceptance that you can't change some things. You just can't. There's your area of interest and your sphere of influence, and they're not necessarily the same. So that was probably a crisis, in the sense that I wanted to fix mistakes or change things, but I wasn't empowered to do that. And that's not a complaint. That's just a fact. You have 70,000 people in a firm. They can't all decide that how things are going to be run, and inevitably in very large firms there's a little bit of bureaucracy and empire building, or differences of opinion, and you have to live with those.
And how did you learn to how did you learn to overcome it then? How did you get over I guess that going from being that big fish to being a smaller fish in a bigger pond?
Well, I think I used to regularly recite in my mind the Serenity Prayer, which is probably my mantra to live with, which is, as I said earlier, to accept the things that you cannot change and have the courage to change the things that you can. but moreover, the wisdom to know the difference. And I think if you just say those words to yourself, then you can succeed. You can, stop yourself sinking, because there are some things that you can make a difference at, not by being awkward or just failing to comply, but there are some things that you can be productive and helpful, and try to steer things in a slightly different direction. And there are other things that you just simply, perhaps it's not your place to change them, or you're not empowered to change them, and you have to accept that that's the way you work, and then you work around that. And if you really cannot comply or cannot feel happy in your work, then maybe it's time to go and find another job. But I think first of all, you do need to keep an open mind. There are more ways of skinning a cat than your own ideas.
And how do you maintain work-life balance? And how do you switch off from work and find that balance?
Yes, well, I suppose normal people don't completely switch off from work. If there's something that is frustrating you, you probably come home and moan at your husband or your wife and get it off your chest, or you moan to colleagues. I think, moaning can be quite therapeutic and cathartic, but has limited value in the medium term. It's perhaps a short-term steam vent, but I think in the medium term, you've got to ask yourself some searching questions about what is the best way to behave in these circumstances. I mean, in the end, we're all hunter-gatherers. We're out there and we are earning a living, and we need to earn that living in the right way. So we need to do our jobs properly. We need to earn our keep. We need to be valued, and we need to help other people around us achieve whatever it is the vision of the business that you're working for, or for yourself if you're working for yourself.
Which leaders do you admire most, Lynne, and why?
Well, let's not get into politics, shall we? Because that's going to be too long a debate for today. I think probably I was giving some thought to who I would admire the most, and I think it's got to be Nelson Mandela. I think that would be a figurehead, an individual who had the best combination of humanity and leadership and empathy, patience. I mean, just unbelievable determination. And I think one thing that I wouldn't say I can take anything from Nelson Mandela and put it into practice, except for the fact I believe very strongly that he had faith in his convictions, and I think that is a lesson that I would like to take on board myself. That there are things in everyday life that can disillusion you, that sometimes you can feel that objectives are unattainable, but if you just keep faith and keep a sensible head about you, and if you know deep down that really anything is attainable if you work hard at it, then keeping that belief and that faith in your ultimate vision and objective, then you will succeed, or at least you stand a better chance of succeeding than you would have done without that faith.
Lynne, today we've talked a lot about positive leadership qualities. For me, I'm interested to find out your view on what leadership qualities you think are overrated.
Yes, I mean, there are a lot of books that you can read out there about motivating people, delegating. I think when I'm a leader of a business and I'm looking to recruit a manager, it is sometimes too easy to be swayed by their presentation. And I think a little bit like magazines representing the ideal woman in a certain way, we do the same in business. We look at individuals, we look at the cut of their jib, you know, the suit that they're wearing and the way that they present themselves. Are they able to make their point very eloquently? Are they, you know, hugely engaging? And I think that sometimes sways the decision about who might make the best manager, the best leader, the best candidate. And I think that's something that we should probably not put as much stock on as we do. I come back to people's ability to motivate and relate to other people as being, I think, a key performance indicator. I mean, clearly, if you're in a very technical job where you need certain skills, you know, leaving that aside, but in a team working environment and a business where we're all should have a shared vision, it isn't necessarily the right person to choose. You know, your stereotype view, somebody who fills in all the right boxes on a survey. I mean, that was very vogue, wasn't it, a little while back? All us leaders had to, and I think they have value, but I think it is also possible to get people to do the job without that matrix.
Yeah, I think it's about understanding the competencies required to perform the role and the competencies required of the team in general, and blending them together and trying to find the right blend, because we all have unconscious bias and we all like people who are like us, and therefore there is a natural tendency to say, well, this is the right person because you seem to get along with them better, or they present better. But actually, if we do that, then we limit ourselves in terms of diversity. And you know, it's really important that we get diverse teams, but that we cover the full gamut of diversity. You know, gender, ethnicity, race, thinking. You know, we've got to have that full gamut of diversity within a team to make a team effective and to see things from different angles and take on board different point of views, so we can best represent our clients, our customers, our members, our shareholders, basically who the key stakeholders are.
That's all very true, and you know, I'm a wholehearted supporter of diversity in the workplace, as indeed are a number of my clients. I think I have some fears sometime, and I've seen it in practice, that there can be occasions of reverse discrimination occurring, where you feel that in order to be diverse and, you know, fill all the colours of the rainbow, if you're missing a colour and somebody comes along for a job interview, isn't necessarily the right person for the job, there's a temptation then to recruit that person because they'll fill your missing colour in your rainbow chart, and that's not necessarily the right thing to do. So I would like to think that I don't recruit people just because I think they will tick a diversity box, but because I think that they are the right person for the job and will add to the whole business. It's a difficult thing to choose between sometimes. You know, when you're making that decision, it can be a bit of a tightrope.
I think it's a balancing act, because you've got to get the right leadership skills, you've got to get the right leadership competencies, the right technical competencies, and then you've got to blend that with different worldviews. Because diversity in its own right is fine, but actually diversity and inclusion go very closely hand in hand, and it's very difficult to have one without the other. and you've got to find that balance so that you take your key stakeholders' views into account, but that you have the skills necessary to deliver the work that needs to be delivered.
Yeah.
Okay, Lynne, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show.
You're very welcome, and I hope you've got something that you might be able to use.